Hi, this is Julia with Stork'd, the podcast about the many ways to build and define family. And I am thrilled to introduce our next guest, Gwen, today. Gwen has polycystic ovary syndrome, or PCOS. And as a result of that diagnosis, Gwen was told that she would never have kids. And still, she spent some time healing herself, first with a combination of holistic and traditional medicine, and by connecting with her community, by getting outdoors, by getting sober, and by really tapping into her feminine side with a series of exercises intended for her creativity or her creative muscle. In fact, Gwen has actually healed from two major diseases. As a teenager, she had a pretty rare disease that was actually written about in medical texts. So Gwen's story is one of healing. It's about identifying what's core to you and sort of, as she describes it, tearing away all the noise, all the stuff that was not core, not as important, and getting down to that sense of being at home within yourself. As a result of all this healing, actually, Gwen had a very surprise pregnancy. And so she went from being told that she would never, ever have kids to now being the mom of two and balancing two co-parents, the two fathers for these children. I really appreciate this episode and all that Gwen offers. She teaches us that creativity is deeply healing. She teaches us that sobriety can be a tool to find and access who you are at your core. And she also talks about community. And you know that community is one of those things that I think is so important to health and well-being and rarely discussed in the context of family. So it's a pleasure to introduce you to Gwen. And don't forget that if you love this podcast, please share it with friends, spread the word, go ahead and give us a review on Apple Podcasts, and enjoy this episode. Thank you. Welcome, Gwen. I'm so excited to have you here today. And I'd love if you could introduce yourself to our audience.
Yes. Hi. It's nice to see you. It's good to be here. My name is Gwen Dittmar, and I am a coach. I'm a healer, breathwork guide. I'm also a mother of two. I'm also divorced, and I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm an aunt. I'm a friend, and I live in Los Angeles. And my whole mission really in life is to use everything for my learning, for my healing, for my growth, and for my expansion. So however that shows up in life, with grace and with ease.
I love that. And not only do you use that for your own growth and expansion, you really do have tools and resources that you share with others to support their growth and expansion. One of which is a podcast, one of which is some breathwork classes and coaching and so many other resources.
Yeah.
I really enjoy your podcast because I feel like I walk away soothed and like there's something very special about your voice and the way in which you work with people who are guests. So I'm really excited for you to be here today with us.
Thank you. Yes, I was very nervous to do my podcast. I think it was definitely an energy. It was like a learning, definitely a growth period for me to allow myself to be seen by others, to be heard by others, and also to allow people to see how I work with people. That felt very, very vulnerable. It wasn't something I wanted to do. It was something that I kept being pulled to do, something that kept telling me needed to be done. And to me, that's a very interesting distinction to find inside of yourself and to say yes to. And I would say that's definitely an energy that I felt, in my journey of becoming a mother and having a family.
Yeah, everything you just described, I'm nodding because so much of that feeling pulled to do something, the decision to step in and say yes, and just feeling like it's almost bigger than yourself is also what I felt in my family building experience. And so I'd love to hear a little bit from you about how your family's composed. You defined yourself as a sister, an aunt, a mother, etc. So if you could tell us a little bit about how your family's composed and then talk us through the energetics of saying yes to this family.
Yes. So I would say my family is composed of different arms. I would say family is community, it's friendships. I would say family is the unit of, my children and co-parents. And then there's, an extended family that goes beyond that too. But I really do feel that my community, my friends, and also my family of origin are a big part of my word that I use, family.
Yeah. And is your family of origin that group that you were either birthed into or raised by, or your chosen family, do they share your same emphasis on paying attention to and attuning to the energetics of the world around you?
I don't know if I would say in the same way. No, I would say growing up, I often felt very different, very out of place. I saw through probably just a different lens, not better or worse, but just different. And, I remember my mom would always comment that I asked a lot of old soul questions. I would ask a lot of wise questions, even as a little girl. I had a lot of deep knowings about things that, I would share with her. And so, yeah, my family of origin is, a mother, a father. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for a majority of my childhood. Traditionally, my dad went to work, my mom stayed at home. I had an older brother, I had an older sister. I was the youngest child. And we grew up in the suburbs outside of Philadelphia. So it was very quintessential, friends in the neighborhood, playing with other little kids, sharing, summers between yards and between homes. And
Almost that idyllic,
yeah,
traditional family mental model that some of us carry with us.
yes. And as most families, there's always some type of dysfunction and some type of, grit within family. So, there was definitely a lot of things that I also experienced that have made me who I am today. And I'm grateful, for the beauty and for the grit. And then my family also includes now my two children and both of their fathers. And yeah, like there's definitely a lot of interesting dynamics within our nuclear family right now. Yeah, and then, my community is a huge part of our family because we don't live close to our family. We live far. So, our family here in California has become that to us, people that we spend holidays with and that we learn through and make mistakes and have arguments in front of and learn to forgive. So,
I
yeah.
like that definition of community is, if you're thinking about those individuals in your life that step in and sort of replace the mechanics of having a family nearby, you're talking about holidays, you're talking about rituals and traditions and disagreements and learning opportunities. And that's a really nice way of thinking about family.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things that I do miss about having grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins nearby is that, yeah, we learn through our family, through our community that we're with, whether it's something we're born into or something we choose to create ourselves. So, yeah, learning how to, again, have those arguments, to be uncomfortable, to share feelings, to cry, to forgive and to be forgiven with the people that we have in our daily life here in California.
Tell me a little bit about how you built that community, because one of the things that I've heard from many of the people that I've spoken to, both within and outside of the podcast, have been that feeling rooted in a community, feeling connected to the people that you see on a day-to-day basis is one of the most important things you can do as a parent, as an adult, and it's something that culturally we've started to lose. How do you go about doing that? How did you create this community of yours?
One was intention. I remember, when I moved out to California, I really had a strong desire, a strong intention to create and to be with people that shared a lot of the same values. And when I moved out to California, it just felt really wonderful to find people that wanted to spend their free time outside in nature, hiking at the beach, surfing, running, training for races. The next big thing that I noticed was that I got sober. So that was a really huge shift of learning how to have fun and learning how to celebrate and to feel life without numbing of alcohol or drugs, because our culture is very alcohol driven.
It's true.
Is very centered around happy hour, mom groups, wine Wednesdays. And so, really finding people that wanted to live life sober and wanted to feel everything that life delivers us and that wanted to do it without numbing out. That was a really, really big part for me.
Yeah, I'm curious when you think about that one in particular, or even the other one, the outdoorsiness and the living the same values as you. Did you seek people within and explicitly say, I'm looking for somebody who could do things sober with or who likes to be outdoors?
When I first moved to California, I was not sober, but I wanted to live near the beach. I wanted to have that as like a very core part of my life. And so I was introduced to somebody that had an apartment 2 blocks from the beach that was looking for a roommate because their roommate was moving out. And, that happened within like a month. And then
Amazing.
the next thing that happened was I wanted to, dive into spirituality. And so I met somebody who introduced me to their therapist, and I started doing therapy for the first time in my life. And then she ended up, introducing me to the school where I got my master's in spiritual psychology. And then at that same time, I got sober. So it's like it all just kind of started to fall into line. And I would say that school that I went to, that was probably one of my very first experiences of feeling like I was home, like I was with people and that I was in an energy, like just literally a physical energy of where I was supposed to be and where I had been looking to be my entire life.
I love that concept of home. One of our other guests has said that family is home. And I love that you're bringing that theme back up. It sounds like home for you was a little bit of the people that you were surrounding yourself with. And it was also a little bit of being home within yourself.
Totally. I think it starts within self, of really knowing and remembering who I truly am. And that program that I was in was that journey. It was a journey of removing all of the things that I had been conditioned and misbelieved and bought into, misuse of my energy, misuse of an understanding of who I was, and really coming back home to who I was. And, it was through that experience that my life really started to shift and change. I had had a lot of health conditions that I thought and I was told that I wouldn't be able to have children. And so, even in that program, I healed so much. I healed, my connection with my femininity. I healed my connection with my masculinity inside of myself. I healed connections with family. I healed connections with love and with relationship and with spirit. And I learned how to parent myself, how to love myself, how to love my inner child, how to really be for myself what I had always been seeking.
That is so powerful. I love this parenting yourself first and finding your own inner child before becoming a parent. It sounds like, if I'm hearing the timeline correctly. Now, when you were working on your self-healing, was that with the intention of creating a family? Were you saying to yourself, if I can heal this PCOS, then maybe I can have my family?
Well, my initial intention was to heal my body. It wasn't necessarily to have children. However, when I did move in with that particular apartment that I moved into, we ended up dating a couple of months after we were living together, and he and I are still friends. He's such a wonderful person. And we've had several different dovetails of how like he's helped me and I've helped him. And it's just really wonderful to celebrate where we both are now with our own families and our own, experiences. But I would definitely say that when I met him, and I think kind of being in California, something had really shifted inside of me. And I'd never really thought of myself as becoming a mom. I thought I would just be more of a businesswoman and a helper and like a healer. But like meeting him kind of made me think like, I don't know, maybe. And then I realized, my body was not experiencing what a woman experiences. And so I really wanted to set out to heal that. And I
need to find that. What do you mean by that? What should a woman be experiencing? What was your body doing that you were hoping would heal or be a little bit different?
So I had polycystic ovary syndrome and I was not having regular menstrual cycles. And, I found this really wonderful integrative physician through the therapist that I was working with and through the shaman that I was working with. And, she didn't do anything in that first session. All she did was she pulled out, I guess it's Christine Northrup's book, Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom. And she opened up the page to polycystic ovary syndrome. She pushed it across her desk to me to read it. And she says, "Does this describe you?" And again, it was another moment of like, wow, I feel like somebody gets me and I feel like I'm seeing myself. I'm seeing how I've really been showing up in life as in my masculine energy primarily and pretty much only. And, it was a really big opening for me. She said, "We're going to do all the tests. We're going to do all the physiological stuff." She's like, "But to start, I really want you to start doing something creative at least 2 or 3 times a week. And, I want you to start dancing and I want you, she's like, I want you to just start allowing yourself to feel. And we'll schedule another appointment in a couple of weeks."
That's really interesting that you might be trying to heal something that's a medical diagnosis with something that's emotional and intellectual and creative in nature. How did it feel to do that?
It felt very uncomfortable,
Really?
very foreign. Yeah. Becoming more comfortable with my feminine and emotions and kind of that like surrender and the flow and the fluidity that felt very uncomfortable for me because I had also healed earlier in my life when I was a teenager, something called Meniere's disease. And, once we finally, after a year of not knowing what was going on with me, once we finally got my, the diagnosis, I wanted to heal it naturally. I wanted to heal it, holistically. And the doctors were very frustrated because they wanted to do it, allopathically. And I really felt like there was something much deeper. So I've always kind of been like that. I did approach, the polycystic ovary and I started creating moon rituals and started, following that doctor's orders of really tapping back into like my creativity, into my flow, my fluidity, my femininity, finding more comfort in being present with emotions and emotional waves and, surrendering. And, through, I think, a combination of doing physical and doing allopathic and holistic, as well as the emotional and the spiritual, I did start having cycles and I did really heal that which was moving through my body as my soul's medicine.
That's really incredible, to integrate the 2 types of medicines. Many women suffer tremendously for a long period of time with PCOS. And to hit a point where you were able to bring back that part of you that you identified as being something a woman should do. Not all women, but many do, and heal that's really special. So tell us about the journey from there. So your body starts functioning a little bit more as you hoped it would. And you felt, I would imagine, a little bit more creative as a result or connected as a result. What happened next?
I think it was a combination of, I was doing a lot at that point. I was doing, that healing work. I was also still in that master's program in spiritual psychology. I was sober. I was still fresh and really enjoying like living in California. And I think all of those things just catapulted me into who I really am and allowed me to step out of who I thought I had to be or I had conditioned to be or, needed to be in order to be accepted. And I started having regular menstrual cycles and, I started to slowly shift, the way that I was living and working and loving myself. And, I would say I had been in not a relationship, but there was, a person that I would kind of always kind of go in and out with. And over time, I learned a lot about that dynamic also. What was really under that dynamic. There was definitely like trauma. There was a little bit of like, how do I describe it? Relationship had a little bit of some of what, like alcoholism gives. It just gives like
the highs of something coming together and then.
Or the highs, or more of it just being like a way of checking out, a way of distracting, a way of not having to be so serious, a way of like being able to take a break, from life. It's very common for people that are sober to realize that ism shows up in other ways also, whether it's with food or with exercise or money or, love. And so, there was definitely a lot of learnings in that relationship, but I had gotten very clear that it was not healthy for me. It was not aligned. It was very toxic. And yet, as I mentioned in the earlier part of the podcast, Spirit definitely had a different idea. And,
we have so little control sometimes.
Yes. Yes. So I had kind of cut that relationship off.
So, okay. So when you say a spirit had a different idea, you're referring to that unexpected pregnancy with your partner, correct?
Not even really a partner. It was kind of like, thank you for helping me move. Let's go out to dinner. And then, that old pattern of like, maybe I can just enjoy myself for an evening and then go on with my life and you can move on with your life. And, we have totally different lives, totally different values, totally different ways of seeing the world. At the time I was training for an Ironman. And so I was like 3 weeks away from the race. So I was in the most pristine health of my life, I think. And I, at that point I could run, like 20 miles. I could swim 2 miles. I could bike like 100 miles.
Oh my God.
So for me, there was a moment while it was happening that I saw her face and I was like, that's bizarre. That never happens when you're doing this.
It's not a sexy thing to have in the back of your mind when you're enjoying a moment.
It was very, very spiritual.
Yeah.
And then I just remember like kind of waking up in the morning and feeling off. I really felt my body was off. And I thought to myself, I think I might be pregnant.
The next morning, like instantly.
Yeah.
Wow.
My body was I'm very sensitive to begin with. Also, I think because I don't drink, I don't use drugs, like it's like my energy is very clear. I'm very clear with my energy. And I had spent all those years with doing, emotional womb medicine with myself and really attuning to my body, attuning to every, little thing that happened in my body. And then on top of that, being an athlete, and training for a race like that, I was extremely attuned. And I just think spiritually, I was very awake and aware. And so I remember I flew to North Carolina that day because I was still working, part-time in pharmaceutical research consulting. And I had a research site that I needed to go visit there. My sister lived there. And so I flew and I remember just feeling like super sick. I remember when I landed, I was exhausted. And the next morning, in typical fashion, I was going to, do my swimming and my training, 5 a.m. before I went to work. And I slept through my alarm. I was late to work. I was exhausted. I went to work that day and I came home to the hotel thinking, okay, I have to train. I can't miss a day of training. So I was going to train really quick before I went to my sister's house for dinner. And I sat down on the bed and I literally fell asleep sitting up straight.
Yeah, that's your body saying, don't train right now. We need to, work over here.
Preserve. Yeah, we need to have going somewhere else. And the next morning I woke up and I was like in all my clothes. I had missed all my sister's calls. She's like, what happened to you? And so I guess it was probably 2 weeks later. I think I just knew for sure. I think the following week when I went home, I went on my bike to think like, okay, I'll just go for a light bike ride. And I fell on the bike. I fell off of my bike and I remember laying on the ground thinking, I know I'm pregnant. And if I keep doing this, like I might not be pregnant anymore. And I remember making a decision like, this is important to me. This is something I want. Like, this is sacred and I need to treat my body as sacred. And I, made a decision not to do the race and made a decision to like take a test and So yeah, I mean, I kept swimming because swimming was, easy.
Yeah. Gentle and nourishing.
I had done a lot of deep healing. And interestingly enough, too, right before I got pregnant, I had moved through this experience with my mom. And it was, even though I had healed a lot with my family through that program and through sobriety, my mom and I had a talk, and it was a talk that needed to be had for a very long time. And it was a talk about, just sharing, hurts and wounds. And there was a lot of forgiving and a lot of forgiveness and a lot of love that it was exchanged in that conversation. And I remember walking away from that conversation feeling like I feel complete, like I feel complete. I feel like I can trust myself. I can trust myself to have hard conversations. I can trust myself to be loving in those hard conversations. I can trust myself to share, when I was hurt, and also to forgive. And I felt like I was really a mother for myself. I had done so much inner child work up until that point, and it was I will never forget how it felt. I really felt like I could really mother myself. I can trust myself. And about a month later that I got pregnant, when I was told I really would not be able to have children.
That is such a powerful moment. For starters, I think we all have complicated relationships with our families, and they can take many, many years to build the trust back amongst family members or to have those difficult conversations. But to have a really powerful conversation, walk away feeling whole, feeling complete, and then have this surprise thing that was never supposed to happen. The timeline of that just is almost spooky.
Yes. Very, very miraculous, I would say. And this is
That's a good word.
I do hold for miracles. I hold for miracles in my clients' lives. They experience a lot of miracles because I know it's possible. I know miracles are possible. And I also know, what is it within my domain and what is not within my domain as a spiritual being having a human experience. I remember I was really obsessed with finding this at one point when I was doing a lot of reading and in my, height of self-learning and self-discovery and self-healing. And I remember having all these different books laid out on my bed, and I had highlighted where they had all kind of said the same thing, just in different jargon, different ways. But it's like miracles, I think, happen when we are so crystal clear on what we desire. And it's like you can feel it, you can taste it, it. It's like embodied, it's inside of you. And I think what that is, from other studies and other things that I've learned over the years is being able to tap into that multidimensional consciousness. And at the very same time, in our humanness, being able to say, I'll be okay if that never happens. I'm going to be okay. And I will be happy, and I'll be satisfied, and I'll be content if this thing that I deeply desire and want, and I can feel, and I know is going to happen, will never happen.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to underscore. And I appreciate you defining what it means for you to hold for miracles, to recognize that miracles happen, and that if they don't, it's still okay. When you say that you have to get crystal clear, you have to have that inner knowing that is just so, it's almost like fills your pores. What are you referring to? Are you referring to a desire for a child? Are you referring to a desire for a oneness with yourself, a desire to heal your relationship with your mom? Like, what was the crystal clarity with which you approached this particular moment in your life?
That particular moment definitely had to do with wanting to get married, wanting to have a child, and wanting to have a family. And I had, prior to that time, I also had done, a lot of research on adoption. I had done some research on different fertility options for myself. I went to Africa for 3 weeks and, thought about, that as an option. I had been doing mission work there, but really came home thinking maybe that is how I'm supposed to be a mother in this lifetime. Maybe I was a mother in a previous life and I'm going to be a mother in another lifetime. And maybe this is just how, God and spirit wants me to be a mother here right now is through helping others, maybe an adopted child. Maybe it's just being a mother to my nieces and my nephew. Maybe it's, really bringing that loving energy to my clients and just holding that space for them. And I had gotten super clear that because I was in that really, toxic experience with another person. And I had gotten very clear that maybe it's just not for me. Maybe this like whole buy the house, get married, have the kid, do the life, maybe it's just not for me. And it was very sad. There is a very deep grieving process. It wasn't just, unicorns and rainbows. It was very painful. It was uncomfortable. It was sad. There was a lot of grieving. But when I finally got to that point, it's almost, I don't know how to describe it, but it's just like, it's the same feeling that I had when I got sober and I really recognized like that I was a high functioning alcoholic and that there was also something very not healthy. And I had to learn how to live a completely different way. And I surrendered myself over to whatever it was. Sometimes I use the word God, but, sometimes I use spirit, whatever it is. It's like, there's a very powerful experience. And it's like, if I allow myself to fall to my knees and truly surrender to it, it is just the most incredible experience.
Interesting. It's almost like you're extracting my life and my experiences and sharing them as though they are your own and like, get out of my head. But there's two things I want to comment on. The first is my sense of the spiritual books that I've read and sort of the themes and the patterns. I totally agree with you that they all talk about clarity and that things happen when you have that clarity and that inner knowing. But there's another theme, which is even if you have clarity, you can't control the form in which it comes. And so what I'm hearing you say is you wanted family, you wanted it in a more traditional way. You were open to many of the other paths. And look, bam, it hit you in a totally unexpected way with a partner that you are no longer currently with in a romantic way, and now 2 children. So I think the formlessness is really an important component as well.
Yes, I was actually going to share about that too, is that to be willing in that surrender is to, really surrender it over to spirit as spirit sees fit. And I think that is really, really tough.
It's really tough because, we want things to look a certain way. We want them to feel a certain way. We want, particularly if you are an East Coast girl, like both of us are, there's a little bit of a planfulness and but. Well, let's fast forward a little bit because now that you're the Gwen that I've met, you've got 2 kids, you're co-parenting with a couple of participants, you define yourself as a single mom. Tell us a little bit about the mechanics of your parenting life and how you balance it all and how you think about managing these 2 wonderful little beings in the context of the other people who are parenting with you.
Yeah. So, my daughter and I had a really beautiful time together by ourselves. And then when she was about 2.5, I met my ex-husband and, we had a son together. And then, fast forward, it was just one of those moments again where it's like my soul knew, even though my human self didn't want to have to move through a separation and a divorce. I think, my human self also felt a lot of failure because like I had already had this other experience of like not being with my child's father. So that was really, really tough. It was excruciating, actually. But I knew from experience that I needed to follow what I was feeling inside. I needed to follow what that spirit guidance was. And it was very rocky. My ex-husband wasn't very happy about it. There was a lot of hurt. But now, several years later, we are finding a new rhythm and we're finding a new groove, and it feels a lot more like co-parenting when you hear that word co-parenting. There's still boundaries. I think there's still a lot of trust that's being rebuilt on both sides. And, I think we're just, there's a willingness to learn about ourselves and our part that we played. And there's also a willingness to rebuild trust for our son And there's also, a rebuilding of a lot of trust for my daughter.
Yeah. It's interesting. So you say that your daughter and you were by yourself for a period of time, then you met somebody new. Did her biological dad stay in the picture? Was he involved in the parenting at all? Is he now?
He at first was not, and then he wanted to. And so when she was about two, he started to come back physically into her life. That was a challenging time also, because there was a big learning curve. There was a lot of hurt and trust that needed to be rebuilt. So yeah, there were a lot of very insane stories during that time, but now where it stands is that, yes, they have, it was very important to me, regardless of any distrust or regardless of any experiences I had had with him, that she, needed to have a relationship with him, and he was wanting that. And so it was just about doing that in a way that was going to be safe for her. And, yeah, I think that. So now they do, like, that's, she has time with her dad now. And, that time is like growing a little bit. It's expanding a little bit.
I imagine it's really tough to fold somebody back in and to let your daughter have an independent relationship with that person when you've got a different history with him than she does.
Yeah.
And if I'm hearing you correctly, was the folding him back in happening simultaneously to your dating and building a relationship with your ex-husband?
Yeah, that was tough, because when I had first met my ex-husband, her dad was not in her life. There had been a lot of, email exchanges and such, but really not a follow through.
Yeah.
So it was very odd that it it kind of came back in as I started dating my ex-husband. It definitely probably created challenge within the marriage, for sure, but it is part of the journey.
How did it go from being one-on-one, the two of you and your daughter, to sharing her or having her share you with these two other people, and then three as soon as your son came along?
Yeah, it was interesting. I think we had a really solid bond, even, when my ex-husband came in. There's definitely an interesting dynamic that I think happened between the two of them, from his perspective, versus my perspective. My perspective was that I was a single mom. I was providing 100% financially. I was taking care of 100% financially. So I wasn't necessarily looking for, a dad for her. I was looking for a partner for myself. I was looking for a companion. And, I can't speak for him, because I don't, I really never know someone else's like heartfelt experience. There definitely was like a desire to create a family, and we did. And I think, we did our best at bringing everything together. And I think he, like, his heart was there. I just think there were a lot of layers.
Yeah.
Of layers that were very unconscious and very unknown. And then I think, over time, it just wasn't aligned. It just wasn't in alignment. And so, I did make a choice that we needed, there have been many conversations of taking a break, getting separated, not being together. Like, I don't feel like we're happy. Children deserve to be with people that are happy versus people that are miserable and together. And there were times, where we did even separate, and it was actually more enjoyable. It was like kind of like quieter. It was like relieving. But again, I think like I was kind of really seeing a lot of that. I don't know if he was seeing all of that maybe as clearly as I was. So it did come more as a shock for him.
What advice do you have for somebody who's thinking about either integrating their family, bringing in a new partner or a new family, And then the same question goes for what advice do you have for somebody who's thinking about dissolving the traditional family unit and moving into a space that you're now occupy?
Yeah. I would say, bringing someone in, kind of meaning like if I had to do it all over again.
Exactly. Yeah.
Definitely, I would just go very, very slow because it's interesting when you have a child, you're not just like if you were a single person. And I really attempted to say that and share that. And like, it's a very different way of operating. But I think it's like anything else, like until someone experiences it themselves, then it doesn't make as much sense. So yeah, I think there were a lot of things that went on that were just not conscious. So for me, I would go very, very slow. I would really, really take a lot of time. I don't even know if like at this point, like I would even really involve somebody that I'm dating, like in with my kids. I would probably have a tendency to keep that just a little bit more separate.
Yeah, I understand that. And then, of course, there's always a trigger point where if you want the relationship to progress, you need to start integrating it, but you have to be very careful with the children.
Well, yes and no. I think that's where we get to have sovereignty versus like societal pressure of what we're supposed to do when we're in partnership, of what we're supposed to do when we're in family, of what we're supposed to do when we're, integrating. Like for me, I do think it could be okay if people wanted to. I've coached people that have kept their families separate, but they've been very strong and very together, but they just chose to raise their children like in their own homes. And when they didn't have their children to be together. So
An interesting model.
I think everybody gets to choose like what really fits for them, and whoever they're choosing to be with needs to really be honest with themselves of whether that's what they want and whether that's what they choose. Cause I feel like that might have been the biggest learning lesson from the marriage, was that I think there were choices that were being made that really weren't in alignment with what someone really felt inside.
Mm. Yeah.
We really wanted inside. So I think it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of self-awareness to know, what do I really want? And what am I doing because this is what society says I should do, versus what do I want to do because this is what's right for me, and this is what's right for my kids, and this is what's right for my family.
Yeah, I think that's really important. It's the hardest thing is having the self-awareness to know this is what works for me. And then the second hardest thing is to communicate it to your partner so that they too can make the decision, does that work for me?
Running that potential risk of that other person saying, no, that doesn't work for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to be sensitive about time. I'd love if you could share with us a little bit. You've talked us through your journey. You've talked us through how you got here, healing your body, healing your soul, healing your relationship to your own motherhood, building a family, and then actually walking away from a relationship. Who is the Gwen that we're talking to right now? How would you capture or encapsulate what you're experiencing right now?
Hmm. She is, I think Gwen has come out of the pandemic. Gwen has come out of, homeschooling and working, and
Yeah.
has come out of a divorce and a separation. And my mom died the year before that. So it's been a big few years. And so right now I am enjoying my life. I'm really enjoying simple pleasures of snuggling in the morning with my kids, of, reading books at night, of sitting outside in our yard, of playing and helping with school. And I really get this energy that happens. I never understood it, but now I get it, of what happens, when people have kids, that, sometimes certain priorities change. And so, being able to help with homework and has taken on more of a priority than like hustling in my work and like grinding out the next thing.
Sure. I like that enjoyment and ease. Well, Gwen, where can we find you if we're looking for coaching or your podcast or just the general wisdom that you have to share?
my website, which is gwendittmar.com. Also, podcast is on all the major listening vendors. So that's called The Beautiful Grit. And also Instagram is also at Gwen Dittmar.
Perfect. I highly encourage you to take a listen to her podcast, to take a look at her resources, both on Instagram and website. There's so much more to this story that we couldn't plumb today, but it was really a pleasure talking to you.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Stork'd with your host, Julia Carroll. This podcast is changing the conversation around the ways people define and create family. If you like what you hear, please support us by sharing with friends and following on Instagram at Stork'd_podcast. We also always appreciate it when you rate and review us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information, visit storkedpodcast.com to sign up for our newsletter. That's STORKD podcast.com.
Hello, Stork'd family. Did you know that the FDA does not require tampon brands to provide a full list of ingredients on their boxes? Yeah, seriously. That's why so many of the big names use the disclaimer, may contain, before they list all these synthetic ingredients like rayon, polyester, and fragrance. It's time you meet Lola. They're always up front, even on the back of the box. Founded by women with sky-high standards who think that what they put on and in our bodies matters. Lola offers period, sexual wellness, and vaginal health essentials made with high-quality, natural ingredients. Gynecologist-approved, clean products that are by your side during every stage of your life. Find exactly what you need at mylola.com, Amazon, Walmart, and select retailers nationwide.